Hello guys and welcome to my last video of this year. Following the result of the vote, you have chosen a build that must contain only missiles, and it is frankly surprising how powerful it is. Choosing the fleet was hard, but I decided to go with a good old classic, the Gryphon. For good performance, we must have a minimum of 8 ships and make sure to attack no more than 2 fleets at the same time because we may run out of ammo. What we must understand is that the more Gryphons we use, the better the damage our missile volleys will do. Instead of doing it as usual, this time I chose a version that is very easy to make even for new players, thanks to the support doctrine skill which was buffed in this patch with the addition of the ordnance expertise skill. In this setup, support doctrine allows us to have 2 things: a reduction in the costs to deploy our ships and, surprisingly, gain additional experience. There is a variable in the calculation of the extra experience from difficulty that when we do not use officers, we gain more XP, making this skill extremely interesting. To give you an idea, we can generate so many story points with this build that we will not know what to do with them. Also, the fleet consumes very little supplies with derelict operations skill, and Gryphons are easy to find with the Persean League. This implies having damage hull mods, but there is no real impact on missiles. To make it easier to obtain the D-mods you want, you will find a link in the description below showing you how to do it. On top of all that, we are using my new favorite ship, which is the Sentry, to maximize the fleet's top speed as well as the ECM rating for a very low deployment cost. On its side, the Ziggurat is our centerpiece that is used to protect our ships with its moats, while providing a source of EMP and extremely punishing damage. There are a few annoying points though. First, the Ziggurat takes about 11 days to return to 100% combat readiness after each fight with efficiency overhaul hull mod. Also, the Gryphons have to change weapon groups or armament for some battles. As I mentioned, we are also limited in the amount of missiles, and defensively, the majority of our ships are not made to take damage. To survive, our plan is to use a large amount of long-range weapons instead and have our ships rotate to vent their flux. Now, why are we using the Gryphon and not something else? Since we can't use an officer with the missile specialization skill, we need to compensate for the lack of ammo. That's why its system called Missile Autoforge becomes important here, because it replenishes twice the base amount of missiles. In this patch, there has also been a change in the AI behavior so that it can use it more. First of all, the D-mods that are currently presented are the ones that I recommend. Degraded engines and erratic fuel injector don't impact ship's performance, and for damaged weapon mounts and glitched sensor array, they don't affect missiles. As for unreliable subsystems, it's totally legitimate to take it since the fights usually end pretty fast. Even if these are not the ones you have, it doesn't really matter. For the S-mods, ECCM package hull mod significantly improves our missiles, but also completely cancels the weapon range reduction due to the ECM rating. I'll come back to this in a moment. Also, we use Extended Shield's hull mod to get a 360-degree shield, protecting the back of the ship, which unfortunately can be a bit too exposed. For the weaponry, it's very important to focus on kinetic damage and try to overload the enemy. Even if the Squall MLRS is nerfed in this patch, the build already contains 14, which makes it difficult for a fleet to be able to counter them all. While keeping a safe distance with its 1K range, the use of the hypervelocity driver also allows us to have a little more kinetic. Since it is our only offensive weapon other than missiles, the AI behaves a little more aggressively by trying to get closer to its target to shoot, which makes explosive damage missiles like Harpoon MRM even more devastating if they are all grouped together. On the other hand, Harpoons are finisher missiles and can sometimes attack fighters. To activate them, the target must either be overloaded or close to being overloaded, which is a bit annoying in certain situations. The idea came to me to add converted hangar hull mod with a Cobra bomber to improve the chances of overload. The enemy will either tank the damage of the Reaper missile with its shield, or have a breach in the armor and suffer hull damage. In both scenarios, our Harpoons have a significant added value. Besides being guided missiles, their damage is really powerful when there are a lot of them on the battlefield. If we go back to the Cobra bomber, it costs 2 deployment points instead of 3, thanks to the derelict operations skill. Also, we must understand that converted hangar provides a lot of disadvantages, such as the increase in refit time and replacement rate. This is why we are looking to have a very low total replacement time to be able to have continuous missile support, and do the whole fight without reaching the minimum threshold of 30% fighter replacement rate. Compared to the daggers with their guided missiles, they cost a little more in deployment points, which means that we lose a Gryphon, and their replacement time for a complete wing is astronomical. In my opinion, they are not viable with this kind of fleet. Knowing that the Reaper torpedo has no tracking, and that the enemy is desperately trying to avoid our missiles. That's why our sentries are very useful with their salamanders, because they cut off their engines. Having no more maneuverability, the enemy can no longer use its armor to tank the damage. It's surprising how this ship is rarely used by the vast majority of players. Even if it is easy to destroy them, rugged construction hull mod allows us to recover it without problem and sometimes even without additional demod. The cost in supplies and fuel are extremely low, and it's fast enough to capture objectives if we focus on top speed with elite helmsmanship skill, auxiliary thrusters S-mod and unstable injector hull mod. The maximum we can reduce in terms of deployment points is 2 instead of 3. If we add 3 demods with an alpha core, we reach the threshold. Like before, these are the demods that I prefer. Faulty power grid reduces flux capacity and flux dissipation, 2 stats we don't need. In short, these are free demods. Speaking of alpha core, the game considers them as the equivalent of an officer. The support doctrine skill is certainly not useful here, but those that affect frigates are. For example, coordinated maneuver skill increases the nav rating by 6% per frigate when I have an officer, allowing us to have up to a total of 20% top speed for our fleet. Thanks to the gunnery implant skill, we also get an additional 4% ECM rating per frigate. If we add up all the fleet bonuses with the electronic warfare skill, this gives us a total of 45 ECM rating, and this without having captured an objective. It's clearly enough for all the content in the game. Long story short, ECM rating is used to reduce enemy weapon range, but the calculation has been changed in this patch so that both sides can have penalties at the same time. As mentioned earlier, we use ECCM package SMod to have no negative effects on our missiles due to ECM rating. It's not necessary to fully integrate the alpha core to the ship. If we want to do so, the choice would be to add damage control skill, but it's not essential. The important ones for salamanders are target analysis to increase EMP damage, systems expertise to have 4 charges of its fast missile racks ability, and missile specialization to improve our missile volleys. Just for your information, the ship can fire up to 15 salamanders in a matter of seconds, controlling anything within 2K range. We can also use other missiles, but since the Sentry only has 15 ordnance points, the choice is slim if we want to add hull mods as well. Speaking of EMP, a ship that can do it very well and even destroy an entire fleet on its own is the Ziggurat. Its motes eliminate fighters and missiles in a large area, an ideal candidate to add to our team. Contrary to popular belief, the AI can use it without any real problem, with or even without a pilot. Since we already have the derelict operations and support doctrine skills, instead of being at 75 deployment points, it costs 46. The purpose of presenting this loadout is to show you that there are other ways to play it. Its role here is to attack priority targets with its huge damage. We must understand that there are many ships around the Ziggurat. Our guided missiles can easily pass through them. Even if our Gryphons can do all the work, there are still some capital ships and fleets with a large number of monitors that can cause them problems. In terms of demods, they are similar to the rest of our fleet. In this case, increased maintenance rises the minimum crew required, but efficiency overhaul practically cancels the impact. On the other hand, hull mods are different from those that contain beam weapons. For example, expanded missile racks doubles our missile ammo. This means that when we combine phase anchor hull mod, we continually regenerate ammo without reaching the maximum limit. In short, we seriously increase our DPS if it uses phase cloak. As other ships protect the Ziggurat, there is no need to have heavy armor hull mod. To reduce the waiting time due to combat readiness as much as possible, I choose to take efficiency overhaul and solar shielding, and that is in addition to giving other benefits. To turn the ship into a missile boat, the most effective way is to mainly take Omega weapons. In my opinion, the hardest to obtain is probably the Rift torpedo launcher, and having 2 of them is not common. The weapon itself pierces all armor and does a lot of hull damage. This is our primary source of DPS. But I must mention that it's possible for the enemy to avoid these missiles even if they are guided. Another weapon that is just as impressive in terms of its damage is the Resonator MRM launcher. These missiles are fast, have excellent tracking and destroy frigates in no time. The cooldown is very short with phase anchor and it allows us to fire continuous bursts of kinetic damage. In close combat, the antimatter SRM launcher does burst damage that can be impressive, but quite costly in soft flux. The AI for its part manages its use very well, and 4 of these missiles are clearly sufficient to eliminate targets in general. As all our ships already do significant damage at long range, the option is still interesting for certain situations. Finally, we absolutely must have 2-point defense, like the burst PD lasers, and group them with the rift torpedoes and resonators MRM. This way, we force the AI to fire both weapons excessively, increasing our damage even more. Now, what are the options if we don't have any Omega weapons? The classic build that many use is the Tachyon Lances and Heavy Needlers combo. Otherwise, Rift Cascade Emitters and Phase Lances can also be used if we want to capitalize on advanced optics hull mod. As soon as we have the missiles, my advice is to add them because we can clearly see a difference. For those who don't know, it's possible to get the Ziggurat without waiting in endgame and doing all the main quests. I haven't extensively tested it, but 8 Gryphons are enough to get it. Once we're done, don't forget to grab the cash for the Omega weapons. On its side, the Gryphon can't use its usual setup in 2 situations. The first one is when we fight the derelict drones, we take instead the Hydra MDEM launcher. Since it's always a 1v1 situation, we can group our large missile and harpoons with PD like mining lasers to win faster. This way, the AI will not stop firing volleys of missiles. The second one is against the Tesseracts and the Ziggurat. We keep the same setup as for the derelicts, but we have to change our Cobras for Thunders. When facing Tesseracts, they chase fighters, and with their EMP, this allows to separate them to not have too much pressure on our ships. The Hydras also eliminate the fighters more easily and do better damage than Locusts, for example. For people who are skeptical, the battle generally takes less than 2 minutes to do without our Ziggurat and no effort is required. If you want another advice, always keep 14 Thunders and Hydras in your inventory when you explore. Alright, as for the civilian ships, it remains pretty standard. The Atlases have the S-mods to increase their capacity, as well as solar shielding so we don't lose supplies if we go through storms in hyperspace. Insulated engine assembly reduces our sensor profile, making our fleet a little harder to detect, and surveying equipment hull mod lowers the cost for each survey. As for Prometheus, the hull mods remain similar with the exception of high-resolution sensors, which increases the range of our sensor. If we want, we can use Efficiency Overhaul S-mod, but it's not necessary since it costs 3.5 supplies per day to maintain our fleet, which is already extremely low. Finally, the maximum burn level is reached with 4 oxen. In the choice of skills, it all depends on what you want to do. As usual, we take navigation and bulk transport first. To save money early on to buy ships, level up industry as soon as you can. Afterwards, technology is interesting to take because we can get our sentries during the exploration phase, thanks to automated ship skill. And lastly, we finish with leadership. When it comes to combat, it's very easy to manage and we can even be AFK sometimes. In the first wave, we deploy our sentries and the Ziggurat. The frigates capture the objectives while we assign our capital ship towards the enemy. For the following waves, we use the maximum of Gryphons we can and all have the order to defend the Ziggurat. This way, the Gryphons will never be scattered and their grouped attacks will be lethal. Once all the ships are on the battlefield, take your sentries and assign them in light escort on 3 Gryphons that are on each side of the Ziggurat. And that's it. If we have priority targets, we will only give them to our capital ship. With that, I covered everything. 2024 has been a very difficult year for me because of my health, but I'm always happy to read your comments. You will be surprised to learn my next project will be a tournament whose participants will be you, the viewers. I'm not giving any more information at the moment, but it will be perfect for the transition to the next patch. Once again, a big thank you for your support and a big shout out to Pishicode on Discord for the help and the presentation of the new Anubis cruiser available soon. As we can see, the combination of safety overrides with neural interface that has not yet been fixed makes the ship completely broken. Anyway, have a happy holiday everyone and see you in the next video.
got free. Yeah, that money on flex. I get that money on flex. I get that money on flex. I get the money and it's right on cue. Double back up inside my crew. Hold a couple packs, tell 'em I love you. If you wanna be a boss, do it like I do. Yeah, get that money on flex. I get that money on flex. I get that money on flex. You know.